we just walked out here. We're in full safety mode. We got throw ropes, we got buddy system and everything. We've also got this chisel. If you're not on a first ice, if you're not walking with a chisel, you're just taking a risk. The time it takes with an auger is slow you down. This thing, every step you can be making sure you're on good ice. So we were stepping along. This is good ice right there. I got 6.5, 7 inches. Stepping along, stepping along. That is not good ice. See the coloration right there where it goes from white to black? So the wind was in such a way that this has been frozen for probably 2 weeks. That's been frozen for a few days. I mean, what we got out there, 1.5 to 2 inches of ice. And on that white snow, so hard to tell the difference. So that's a really important thing. Always be checking, watch it as it's forming, and keep a buddy system and be safe. That scared me. Here we are on the slow bite, another beauty.
Slow bite in a day.
Got here at 11. It's till 2. They are not jumping out of the hole, but if you finesse them on a tungsten, it is working.
It is possible, but they're not making it easy.
We're gaining on them. And then we got the old sideshow going on, which I've been struggling mightily with this 3D printed doodad to make it catch a fish. And it has caught fish and they are nicer, but I think there's still a learning curve there. But that's what we're doing. We're using little tiny minnows under sideshow bobber on a little treble, and mostly working them with tungsten and plastics on the Vexlar. Working them up and making them bite.
I thought I was gonna get it right when you were about to turn that off, but then he died.
Seconds later. There we go. Nice.
That's 100 fishy.
That is 100.
That is 100 perch. Isn't that wonderful?
That is delightful. We got here, what was it, 11 o'clock to one of the most popularly fished messes on Lake George. Not high expectations.
Especially because nobody was catching fish.
But we moved around a little bit, and then we started using tungstens, black microplastics, and the jaw jacker, which did break the first jig pole I ever had since I was a child, but never mind.
Yeah, what are you gonna do?
It broke it with joy, and I broke it before. And some of these buggers, such as that one, is kind of nice. At no point did we really come unglued on them, but just kept picking them away. I don't know, it's probably 3 o'clock now, so took about 5 hours. But there it is, a limit of Lake George beauties. Hey guys, thanks for watching that. So we started today wanting to go to one of my favorite bays, but as you can see, that wasn't going to happen. So we went to a high pressure spot on Lake George, and I want to talk about how to fish those spots. You think about on a Saturday, or last Saturday when I was there, I counted 300 guys in that bay. It's incredible if you think about that kind of pressure. You imagine being a fish and looking up at the ice, all these holes getting drilled, and every little jig and doodad coming down. And the dumb ones are taken out. And what is left is fish that have adapted to somehow work in that kind of high pressure thing. And I know all through the Great Lakes area, a lot of people have to deal with that. There's no other place to fish. Unfortunately, that's the only safe ice, so we're all stuck there. So it's important also to get along. But I always want to talk about how to get the fish to bite. What I've discovered is, even when they're barely biting or they're sitting on the bottom, if you catch one, you look at what they're puking up, it's going to be mostly a bunch of nymphs, and they're eating. They are eating, they're just not into, they've just seen so many different things that they're not into the normal approach. So what I have found is using a small tungsten jig, which is, I mean, as small as I can get it so that it's still attractive to them, but they're only, I want to look as natural as they can, and some sort of nice, these are microplastics. These are all available at my website at Rogers Rigs. And I've even gone so far as to put the plastic on halfway. Here's a grub. These are what we've been using. I feel like you've got to still use bait. I mean, sometimes you can get away with just a microplastic, but the bait adds that scent. I've been sliding the grub on halfway. Sorry for the gross factor there. And then biting back into the plastic. Because I think at this point, they've seen so much. Most people are dangling that grub off the back end, and they've seen so much of the grubs dangling off the back end that that's almost a turnoff for them now. And if you can string this just right, it's actually just kind of a little rubbery underbelly on the nymph. Gives them a little something different to look at. And you'll see in this video too, we were going very slow. You think about it, nymphs aren't jigging. Nymphs are not swimming up and down the water column at 18 inches at a rip. That's not what they do. So usually, and you'll do far better off with a Vexlar or some sort of a sonar, you can watch your lure come down to the weed bed, hover it just above. What I was doing, I drop into that spot, watch the hand here, my motion was this. I was tickling the jig pole just to bounce it with my fingers like this. And then maybe doing a slow lift of a few inches, because I'm trying to look like that little nymph that's just gone from one little weed and it's hoping it can make it to the next weed. It's making that little jump across. And I'm trying to be as natural as possible to trigger those bites. The other thing is moving around. Once they've caught on, they've been hit on, you'll get a few out of a hole. Just get a bunch of holes going. I like to drill the holes ahead to let the sound cool down. I've seen too at this point in the year, noise makes a big difference. These things are jittery and the dumb ones are already in somebody's freezer. So the other trick we were doing today was using a sideshow. That is a slip bobber basically with a minnow. I buy the perch bait minnows. These are the 1.25 inch long minnows. And using them, we have that about 2 feet off bottom, just above the weeds, so that the smaller perch might not even raise that high. And if we jig in the fish and they've still decided that's a jig, not a something to eat, at least you've got them interested and you've got them collected. If you have 2 or 3 feet away, one of these bobbers with a clean minnow presentation, you can pick up a few. And you'll see we caught a bunch of big ones. A lot of the bigger ones picked up those minnows on the side. And even then, they're not like going nuts. You got to let a bobber go 1, 2, and sink before you set the hook. We were doing that with a jaw jacker too. We had a little bit of a challenge this day. So that is the tricks, I think, on high pressure fish. Figure out exactly what they're naturally feeding on and present it as naturally as you possibly can. They're still going to feed. I mean, that was a high pressure bay in the middle of the day. Because we failed to go on that first ice, we ended up in there at 11 o'clock and fished till about 3 o'clock, and we were still able to get a nice limit of 50 perch each. So the second thing I want to talk about is that safety factor. It's amazing this year the ice has just formed in such a squirrely way that obviously people are being fairly safe. Nobody's dropped through in this area yet, but you've got to be so careful. A couple things I have learned over the years, because I've done things pretty dumb. One thing, when you're going on a brand new fresh ice, don't plan on getting there at daylight. I've done this before. Got there, I knew it was good. I checked it out the day before. I looked out across the lake. It looked great. Let's go. Got all my buddies there. We got our headlamps on. I was leading the way with the spud, and I heard ducks quacking, and then I heard them take off in the dark. And I looked down and realized I had almost walked, and I was a mile out into the lake. I'd almost walked into open water. So I intentionally yesterday, just to take that temptation out, we didn't leave the house till 7 o'clock in the morning. Made sure It was fully daylight, got there, weren't pushing ourselves in a big rush, getting all excited about fish and not thinking about safety first. So don't start first thing in the morning. You can see how important that spud is. I like to have that. The lead guy has got to have a spud, got to have a life jacket on, have some rope. And the difference between a spud and an auger is the auger takes you a little bit of time, and you're more likely to walk a little further before you test. And as you saw there, the distance is one step. One step is perfectly fine, 7 inches of ice. The next step, you're going to die. The nice thing about that spud is it's so simple. Every step you take, you're giving it a good thump, and you can get used to the sound of that, and you know exactly what your ice quality is as you're going along. So a spud is essential. I also have found looking for those transitions. That day it was so scary because there had been 1.5 inches of snow on top, and there was no visible difference between the good ice and the bad ice. But some days you might see a little bit of a color difference. Another trick I've found is while the ice is forming, like a day or two before anything is safe, I do a drive-by of everything and look at the lakes as it's forming, and you get an idea of, whoa, look at that big open water in the middle of the lake. That I'm going to keep that mentally in my mind. Or look, this bay is frozen, but as soon as you get past that line, it's not. Because the next day you go there and the whole thing is frozen. It's all white or it's all black, but it's different generations of ice. And keeping up to date with that, I think, is really important. Really, I mean, snowmobile or four-wheelers, that's where it can get really dangerous because it all looks good. And maybe somebody else went ahead of you with a snowmobile, but they were going 105 miles an hour and they didn't transfer any weight into that ice. So keeping that, four-wheelers and snowmobiles, just not a safe option when the ice is this iffy. Being careful is really the key. So if the ice isn't great and everybody's condensed, I still think you can catch fish. I'd love for you to like and subscribe here at YouTube. Also, jump over and check out rogersrigs.com. That's where I only have a few products there. It's exactly what we use to catch perch. A bunch of it we actually hand tie and make those things. And I'd love for you to check that out too. And like and subscribe. We're going to be making more videos of how to do everything fishing related. Thank you for watching.